The Oakland fog rolled in thick that Tuesday morning, casting a familiar gray blanket over the streets Stephen Curry once called home. At 36, the Golden State Warriors superstar had everything a man could dream of: championship rings, a loving family, and generational wealth. But today, something pulled him back to the weathered courts of his childhood, where dreams were born on cracked asphalt and rusty hoops. Stephen parked his modest SUV. He'd learned long ago that flashy cars drew the wrong kind of attention in these neighborhoods, and stepped onto the sidewalk. The autumn air carried the scent of rain and memories. His Nike sneakers, worth more than most people's monthly rent, crunched softly on fallen leaves as he approached the Theodore Roosevelt Recreation Center. The playground looked smaller than he remembered, its chain-link fence now adorned with new graffiti, but the basketball court remained unchanged. The same bent rim on the north end, the same faded three-point line that had been repainted countless times. This was where it all began, where a skinny kid with an impossible dream learned to shoot from his father's old NBA stories. "Man, you really came back," the voice made Stephen turn, and for a moment his heart stopped. Huddled against the brick wall of the community center, wrapped in a tattered sleeping bag and wearing clothes that had seen too many hard nights, was Marcus Williams. The same Marcus who had been his partner in countless 2-on-2 games, who had stayed up with him talking about making it to the NBA, who had been there through every high school heartbreak and triumph. Marcus's eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the weight of years Stephen could only imagine. His hair, prematurely gray at 35, stuck out from under a worn Raiders beanie. But his smile, that infectious grin that had lit up their teenage years, remained unchanged. "Marcus?" Stephen's voice cracked slightly. How long have you been living out here?" Marcus struggled to his feet, his movements careful and deliberate. "About 8 months now. Lost my job at the warehouse. Couldn't make rent. You know how it goes." He gestured around the empty court. "Figured this was as good a place as any to set up camp. Close to the memories, you know." Stephen felt his throat tighten. While he'd been living in his Atherton mansion, traveling the world, playing in front of millions, his childhood friend had been sleeping on concrete steps 50 miles away. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "I come here sometimes," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Watch the young kids play. Some of them remind me of us, all dreams and no fear." He paused, studying Stephen's face. "Saw you on TV last week. That shot against the Lakers was something else. Still got that quick release." The casual way Marcus spoke about his situation, as if homelessness were just another life update, broke something inside Stephen. This was the same guy who had pushed him to be better, who had driven him to the gym at 6 a.m. during high school, who had believed in Stephen's NBA dreams even when Stephen doubted himself. "Marcus, man," Stephen started, but the words wouldn't come. "What do you say to someone who once shared your dreams but got left behind by circumstances, choices, and the cruel randomness of life?" A group of teenagers approached the court, their basketballs echoing against the morning quiet. They recognized Stephen immediately. Whispers and phone cameras appeared like magic, but Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who belonged here. "Y'all give him some space," Marcus said firmly. "He's just trying to remember what it felt like to be young." The kids backed off respectfully, though Stephen could see them hovering nearby, waiting for their moment. Marcus had always been protective of their friendship, even now. "You hungry?" Stephen asked suddenly. "There's that diner on International Boulevard, remember? Mrs. Chen always gave us extra fries." Marcus hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to," Stephen interrupted. "We need to talk. Really talk." As they walked toward Stephen's car, Marcus moved slowly, favoring his left leg. Stephen noticed but didn't comment. The weight of unspoken years hung between them, heavy as the Oakland fog that refused to lift. The diner was exactly as they remembered. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and the smell of bacon grease that had probably been there since the 1970s. Mrs. Chen was gone, but her daughter recognized Stephen immediately and started to make a fuss until she saw Marcus. Something in the way Stephen looked at his friend made her simply nod and lead them to a quiet booth in the back. "Two number threes," Stephen told the waitress. "Extra fries and coffee, lots of coffee." Marcus smiled. "You remember?" "I remember everything," Stephen said quietly. "That's the problem." As they waited for their food, the silence stretched between them. Outside, Oakland continued its daily rhythm. Buses rumbling past, kids walking to school, life moving forward whether you were ready or not. Inside the diner, two childhood friends sat across from each other, separated by more than just a formica table. Marcus finally spoke. "You don't have to feel guilty, Steph. You made it. That was always the plan." "The plan was for both of us to make it," Stephen replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Plans change," Marcus said simply. "Life happens." But Stephen wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. Not when he could still see the boy who had once promised they'd play together in the NBA, who had practiced free throws until his hands bled, who had believed in tomorrow with the faith of someone who had never been truly disappointed. The food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence, each lost in memories of shared dreams and separate paths. Outside, the fog finally began to lift, revealing the Oakland sky in all its complicated beauty. The next morning, Stephen couldn't concentrate during practice. His shots felt off, his passes lacked their usual precision, and Coach Kerr finally pulled him aside during a water break. "You okay, Steph? Your head's somewhere else today." Stephen nodded, toweling off sweat that felt different somehow, heavier. "Just dealing with some personal stuff, Coach." "Take the time you need," Kerr said, his expression understanding. "Family. First. Always." But Marcus wasn't family in the traditional sense. He was something more complicated, a reminder of who Stephen had been before the fame, before the money, before the world knew his name. Marcus was the keeper of his authentic self, the witness to his humble beginnings, and now he was living in the shadows of the very success they had once dreamed of together. After practice, Stephen drove back to Oakland. He found Marcus in the same spot, reading a worn paperback novel he'd probably found in someone's trash. The sight of his friend trying to maintain dignity in circumstances that stripped most people of it made Stephen's chest tighten. "Good book?" Stephen asked, settling down on the concrete steps beside him. Marcus held up the cover, a Tom Clancy thriller with a broken spine. "Library was closed, and I needed something to do. Amazing how much time you have when you don't have anywhere to be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood wake up. A mother walked by with her young son, both dressed for school. An elderly man shuffled past with his grocery cart, nodding politely. A few joggers passed, their expensive running gear stark against the backdrop of economic struggle that defined this part of Oakland. "Tell me what happened," Stephen said finally. "The real story." Marcus closed the book and leaned back against the brick wall. "You sure you want to hear it? It's not exactly a feel-good story." "I need to hear it." Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the basketball court where their dreams had once seemed so achievable. "Remember when we graduated? You got that scholarship to Davidson, and I got the partial ride to San Jose State?" Stephen nodded. He remembered Marcus being so proud, so excited about his opportunity to play college ball while studying business. "I lasted 2 years," Marcus continued. "Tore my ACL junior year. Nothing too serious, but the coach was looking for an excuse to free up my scholarship. Spot. Academic probation finished what the injury started." "Why didn't you call me?" Stephen asked. "I would have helped. You were dealing with your own stuff. Davidson wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for you either back then. Besides, I was prideful. Thought I could figure it out on my own." Marcus's voice remained steady, but Stephen could hear the old pain underneath. "I moved back home, got a job at a warehouse. Decent money, good benefits. Even met a girl, Jennifer. We got engaged, started planning a life together." Stephen remembered Jennifer vaguely, a sweet girl Marcus had brought to a few high school basketball games. She had adored Marcus, had seen something in him that went beyond basketball. What happened? Economy happened. Company downsized, last hired, first fired. Jennifer stuck with me for a while, but watching someone you love struggle changes things. She needed stability, and I couldn't provide it. Can't blame her for that. Marcus picked up a small stone and threw it toward the court, where it bounced once and rolled to a stop. I tried to bounce back, really tried, but every job I got seemed to disappear within a year. Factory closings, budget cuts, corporate restructuring. After a while, it felt like the universe was trying to tell me something. That's not how the universe works, Stephen said firmly. Maybe not, Marcus replied. But that's how it felt. Lost the apartment, couch surfed with some friends for a while. But you can't stay on people's couches forever. People have their own problems. Stephen thought about his own problems, whether to sign a contract extension, which endorsement deals to accept, how to manage his investment portfolio. The contrast felt obscene. There's more, Marcus continued. Mom got sick. Cancer? Spent my last savings on her treatment. Sold everything I owned. She fought for 2 years, but he trailed off, and Stephen didn't need him to finish. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. How could you know? You're traveling the world, playing basketball, living the dream we talked about. I wasn't about to call you up and dump my problems on you. But I should have stayed in touch. I should have... Should have what? Marcus interrupted, his voice sharper than Stephen had ever heard it. What exactly should you have done? Given up your career to babysit me? Turned down the NBA to make sure I was okay? The question hung in the air between them. Stephen wanted to say yes, wanted to claim he would have made that choice, but they both knew it wasn't true. Success had a momentum of its own, and once you were caught in its current, it became almost impossible to swim against it. I got caught up, Stephen admitted. The fame, the money, the pressure. I lost sight of what mattered. What mattered was you making it, Marcus said firmly. That was always the most important thing. One of us had to make it out. But why did it have to be just one of us? Marcus smiled sadly. Because that's how the world works, Steph. There's only so much room at the top. You earned your spot. I'm proud of you for that. A group of kids approached the court, and Stephen watched them warm up with the same intensity he and Marcus had once brought to this very space. Their movements were sharp, their trash talk confident, their dreams intact. One of them, a boy about 15 with Marcus's build and Stephen's quick hands, caught his attention. That kid's got potential, Stephen observed. Deshaun, Marcus said, lives 3 blocks over. Reminds me of us at that age, all confidence and hunger. You've been coaching him? Informally. When I'm not busy with my busy schedule of having nowhere to go, Marcus said with bitter humor. He's got real talent, but he's also got real problems. Dad's in prison, Mom works 3 jobs. Sound familiar? It did sound familiar. Different details, same story. The cycle of poverty and broken dreams that seemed to define this neighborhood, with only rare exceptions like Stephen breaking free. I want to help, Stephen said suddenly. Not just you, but all of this. The kids, the community, the whole situation. Marcus looked at him carefully. Help how? I don't know yet, but I can't just walk away from this. From you, from what this place means. Be careful, Steph. Guilt is a dangerous motivator. It makes you do things that feel good in the moment but don't necessarily help in the long run. Stephen felt the truth of that statement, but he also felt something else. A clarity he hadn't experienced in years. Sitting on these concrete steps, talking to his oldest friend, he remembered why he had fallen in love with basketball in the first place. It wasn't about the fame or the money. It was about the pure joy of the game, the brotherhood of shared struggle, the belief that tomorrow could be better than today. It's not just guilt, Stephen said. It's responsibility. And maybe it's time I started taking that seriously. As the sun set over Oakland, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Stephen made a decision that would change everything. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. Marcus seemed to sense the shift in his friend's thinking. Whatever you're planning, just remember, charity is easy. Real change is hard. And sometimes the people you're trying to help don't want to be saved. What do you want, Marcus? Really want? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the kids play as darkness slowly claimed the court. "I want to matter again," he said finally. "I want to feel like my life has purpose. I want to believe that the dreams we had weren't just foolish kid fantasies." "They weren't," Stephen said with conviction. "We just need to redefine what making it looks like." Word traveled fast in Oakland. By the third day of Stephen's visits to the recreation center, local news crews had started showing up. The headline was predictable: NBA star visits homeless friend. The story was simple, clean, and designed for quick consumption. Successful athlete shows compassion for less fortunate friend. It fit neatly into the feel-good sports narrative that people love to share on social media. But Stephen knew the real story was more complicated than any headline could capture. He arrived at the court early that morning, before the reporters and cameras could intrude. Marcus was already there, sitting on the bleachers with Deshaun and two other teenagers, all holding notebooks and pencils in their hands like students in an unconventional classroom. "What's this?" Stephen asked, approaching the group. "Mr. Marcus is teaching us about business," Deshaun said, his voice carrying the respect that teenagers rarely showed adults. "How to budget money, how to read contracts, stuff like that." Stephen looked at Marcus, who seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. "Where'd you learn all this?" "Those 2 years at San Jose State weren't completely wasted," Marcus replied. "Plus, 20 years of managing to survive on almost nothing teaches you a lot about making resources stretch." The irony wasn't lost on Stephen. While he had agents and accountants managing his millions, Marcus had been learning real-world financial literacy through necessity. The lesson was being taught with notebook paper and borrowed pencils, but the knowledge being shared was more practical than anything Stephen had learned in his financial planning meetings. "Can you teach me too?" Stephen asked, only half joking. The kids laughed, but Marcus studied his friend's face carefully. "You serious?" "Dead serious. I've got millions of dollars, but I'm not sure I actually understand money the way you do." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right then, pull up some bleacher. Today's lesson is about the difference between being rich and being wealthy." For the next hour, Stephen listened as Marcus explained concepts that his high-priced financial advisors had somehow made more complicated than they needed to be. The difference between assets and liabilities, how compound interest worked in both directions, why financial literacy was more important than financial resources. "Money is just a tool," Marcus explained to the group. "It's not good or bad by itself. But if you don't understand how to use the tool, it becomes dangerous. It can hurt you or the people around you." Deshaun raised his hand. "But if you don't have money, you can't hurt anyone with it, right?" "Wrong," Marcus said firmly. "Not having money can hurt people too. It can hurt your family, your community, your future. The goal isn't to avoid money. It's to understand it well enough to make it work for you instead of against you." Stephen found himself taking notes alongside the teenagers. When had he stopped thinking about money as a tool and started thinking about it as a scorecard? When had his relationship with wealth become so complicated that he needed an entire team of people to manage it for him? After the lesson ended and the kids headed off to school, Stephen and Marcus walked to their usual spot by the wall. The morning fog was lifting, revealing another beautiful Oakland day, but Stephen's mind was elsewhere. "You could teach that class at Stanford and charge $10,000 per student," Stephen said. "Instead, you're teaching it for free to kids who can't afford notebooks. Those kids need it more than—" "Stanford students," Marcus replied. "Besides, what else am I going to do with my time?" "You could do a lot more than survive on the streets, Marcus. You're brilliant. You always were." Marcus looked at him with tired eyes. "Being brilliant doesn't keep you warm at night, Steph. Being brilliant doesn't put food in your stomach or give you a place to shower. Being brilliant just makes you more aware of how much you've lost." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar face. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had run the recreation center's community programs for as long as either of them could remember. She approached with the determined stride of someone on a mission. "Stephen Curry," she said, hands on her hips in the same pose she'd used to scold them for staying too late on the courts as teenagers. "You've been causing quite a stir around here." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Stephen said, standing respectfully. "Good to see you." "Good to see me?" "Boy, you haven't been to see me in 15 years." But her stern expression softened as she looked at Marcus. "Although I have to say, what you're doing with these kids is impressive, Marcus. Deshawn's mother called me yesterday. Said her son came home talking about compound interest and asset allocation. I had to look up what that meant." Marcus smiled. "Just trying to give them some tools they can use." "Tools are good," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "But tools without opportunity are just frustration waiting to happen. These kids can learn all the financial literacy in the world, but if there are no jobs, no pathways, no chances to apply what they're learning, then what's the point?" Her words hit Stephen like a slap. He had been so focused on the individual tragedy of Marcus's situation that he hadn't considered the broader systemic issues. Marcus wasn't homeless because he lacked intelligence or skills or determination. He was homeless because the economic system had failed him repeatedly, and no amount of personal virtue could overcome structural problems. "What would it take?" Stephen asked suddenly. "To create real opportunities, I mean. Not just charity, but actual pathways." Mrs. Rodriguez and Marcus exchanged a look. "You really want to know?" she asked. "I really want to know." "Come with me," she said, leading them toward the recreation center building. "Let me show you what 15 years of community cuts look like." The interior of the recreation center was a study in deferred maintenance and shrinking. Resources. The gym floor was warped in several places. The basketball hoops were held together with duct tape, and the computers in the small learning center were so old they still ran Windows XP. "We used to have after-school programs, job training, GED classes, computer literacy courses," Mrs. Rodriguez explained as they walked through the nearly empty hallways. "We had counselors who helped kids apply for college, social workers who connected families with resources, even a small business incubator program." "What happened?" Stephen asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Budget cuts. Every year, a little less funding. Every year, a few more programs eliminated. Every year, a few more staff positions removed. Now we're down to basic recreation services, and even those are threatened." She opened a door to reveal a room full of unused equipment, computers still in boxes, sports equipment that had never been distributed, educational materials gathering dust. "Donations," she explained. "Well-meaning people who give us things but don't understand that we need operational funding to actually use them. We can't give kids computers if we don't have money to pay for internet service. We can't run sports leagues if we can't afford referees and insurance." Marcus was quiet during the tour, but Stephen could see him processing everything. This was the context for his friend's struggles. Not just personal setbacks, but the systematic dismantling of the support systems that had once helped people bounce back from those setbacks. "How much would it cost?" Stephen asked as they returned to the main lobby. "To bring back the programs you used to have?" Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out a folder from her desk, clearly something she had calculated many times before. "To fully restore our programming, about $300,000 per year. That would cover staff salaries, program materials, facility maintenance, everything." Stephen did quick math in his head. That was less than he spent on cars in a typical year, less than his shoe endorsement bonus, less than he made in 2 games. And that would create real opportunities? Not just busy work, but actual pathways to better lives? "It would create possibilities," Mrs. Rodriguez said carefully. "The rest would be up to the individuals and families who use the services. We can't guarantee outcomes, but we can guarantee opportunities." Marcus finally spoke. "She's right. When I was struggling after college, this place had job training programs, career counseling, even small business loans. If those programs had still existed when I needed them—" He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Stephen felt a familiar sensation. The same clarity he experienced when he saw an open shot, when he knew exactly what needed to be done and had the skills to do it. The difference was that this shot was bigger than basketball, more important than any game he'd ever played. "What if I funded it?" he said simply. "Not just for 1 year, but for 10 years. Guaranteed funding, so you can plan long-term programs and hire good people without worrying about next year's budget." Mrs. Rodriguez sat down heavily in her chair. $3 million. $3 million is nothing, Stephen said, and immediately regretted the words when he saw Marcus's expression. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money relative to what it could accomplish. The question is whether it would actually work. It would work, Marcus said firmly. But only if it's done right. Only if the programs are designed by people who understand the community, not by people who think they know what the community needs. Stephen nodded. Then let's do it right. Let's ask the community what they need and build programs that actually serve those needs. Mrs. Rodriguez was staring at both of them, as if they had just announced they were planning to fly to the moon. Are you serious? You're actually serious about this? Dead serious, Stephen said. But I want Marcus to run it. I want this to be his project, his program, his chance to make a difference. Marcus looked at him with an expression Stephen couldn't quite read. Why me? Because you understand, Stephen said simply. You understand what it's like to fall through the cracks. You understand what people need because you've needed it yourself, and because you're the smartest person I know, even if the world hasn't given you a chance to prove it. For the first time, since Stephen had found him sleeping by the wall, Marcus's eyes filled with tears. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to change lives. Starting with your own 6 months later, the Theodore Roosevelt Community Center buzzed with activity that would have been unimaginable during Stephen's first visit. The newly renovated building gleamed with fresh paint, modern equipment, and the energy of people who believed in possibility again. Marcus stood in the main hallway, clipboard in hand, coordinating the controlled chaos of an organization that had grown from desperate need to functioning hope. His appearance had transformed along with the center. Clean clothes, regular meals, and most importantly, a sense of purpose had restored the confidence Stephen remembered from their teenage years. Mr. Williams, the job fair starts in an hour and we still need to set up the technology tables, called out Deshawn, who had become Marcus's unofficial assistant while maintaining his role as the center's star student. Deshawn, what have I told you about panicking? Marcus replied with a grin. Everything that needs to get done will get done. Trust the process. Stephen watched the interaction from the doorway, feeling a pride that had nothing to do with basketball achievements. The Roosevelt Center had become a model for community-based programming, with visits from policymakers, social workers, and other community organizations wanting to understand how to replicate their success. But the real success wasn't in the visitors or the media attention. It was in the 47 people who had found jobs through their employment program. It was in the 12 small businesses that had launched through their entrepreneurship track. It was in the 83 high school students who had been accepted to college with full financial aid packages they had learned to navigate in the center's financial literacy classes. Most importantly, it was in Marcus himself, not just surviving but thriving in a way that created opportunities for others to do the same. Ready for the big day? Stephen asked, approaching his friend. Ready as I'll ever be, Marcus replied, though I still can't believe the mayor is actually coming to our little job fair. It's not little anymore, Stephen pointed out. 37 employers, including Google, Apple, and the Warriors organization. 800 pre-registered job seekers, live streaming on 3 platforms. This is the biggest employment event Oakland has seen in years. Marcus nodded, but Stephen could see the nervousness beneath his calm exterior. What if it doesn't work? What if we've built all this up and it falls apart? Then we'll learn from what doesn't work and try again, Stephen said firmly. But it's going to work, Marcus. It's already working. The proof was everywhere. The computer lab buzzed with adults learning digital skills. The small business incubator hosted entrepreneurs developing everything from food trucks to app-based services. The youth programs had waiting lists. The financial literacy classes had spawned an informal network of community members helping each other navigate everything from tax preparation to home ownership. Mrs. Rodriguez approached, wearing a new dress for the occasion and carrying herself with the dignity of someone whose life's work had finally received the recognition it deserved. The Channel 7 news crew just arrived, she announced. They want to interview both of you before the event starts. Stephen looked at Marcus, who had instinctively stepped back at the mention of media attention. "You take the lead," Stephen said quietly. "This is your program. Tell your story." "Our story," Marcus corrected. "None of this happens without you believing it was possible, and none of it works without you making it real." The interview went smoothly, with Marcus speaking eloquently about the center's philosophy of community-driven programming and sustainable support systems. Stephen found himself in the unfamiliar position of being the sidekick, answering questions about his motivation, but deferring to Marcus's expertise on the actual work being done. "This partnership between you two is unusual," the reporter observed. "How do you make it work?" Marcus and Stephen exchanged a look that contained 25 years of friendship, loss, and rediscovery. "We remember where we came from," Marcus said simply, "and we never forget that success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about lifting up the people around you." "Basketball taught me that you're only as good as your team," Stephen added. "The same thing applies to life. Community success is the only success that really matters." As the job fair officially began, Stephen watched the controlled chaos of hundreds of people pursuing opportunity with the same intensity he and Marcus had once brought to basketball. Job seekers moved between employer booths with resumes and hope. Employers discovered talent they hadn't expected to find. Connections were made that would change lives in ways both small and profound. Deshaun approached, wearing a suit that the center's clothing program had provided, and carrying himself with new confidence. "Mr. Curry, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for our community." "Thank Marcus," Stephen said. "He's the one doing the real work." "I thank him every day," Deshaun replied. "But I also know that none of this happens without you believing in him. That matters too." The young man paused, then continued with the seriousness that comes from hard-won wisdom. "I used to think success meant getting out of the neighborhood, but watching what you two have built here, I realize success might mean staying and making the neighborhood a place where other people can succeed too." As Deshaun walked away to continue his volunteer duties, Stephen felt a profound shift in his understanding of his own success. The championships, the records, the individual accolades, they were all meaningful, but they paled in comparison to the impact of this work. Later that evening, after the last job seeker had left and the last employer had packed up their materials, Stephen and Marcus found themselves back on the basketball court, where their friendship had begun. The new lights illuminated the recently resurfaced court, and the sound of bouncing basketballs echoed from the nearby youth programs. 96 jobby offers, Marcus said, reading from his clipboard. 43 on-the-spot hires, 12 apprenticeship programs, and that's just today. "Not bad for a day's work," Stephen replied, taking a shot from their old favorite spot. The ball swished through the net with a satisfying sound. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus asked, rebounding the ball and passing it back to Stephen. "We're not even close to finished. This is just the beginning." Stephen nodded, understanding exactly what his friend meant. The Roosevelt Center had become a proof of concept that was already being replicated in other communities. The model they had developed, community-driven programming, sustainable funding, and locally controlled implementation, was being studied by policymakers and social workers across the country. But more than that, they had rediscovered something that had been lost in the individual pursuit of success. They had remembered that the dreams they had shared as children were never really about personal achievement. They were about possibility itself, the belief that tomorrow could be better than today, that hard work and mutual support could overcome any obstacle, that success was only meaningful when it was shared. "I have something for you," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to Stephen. Inside was a photo, the two of them at age 16, arms around each other's shoulders, holding a trophy from a local tournament they had won together. Stephen remembered the day clearly. They had been inseparable, convinced that they would conquer the world together. "I kept this all these years," Marcus said quietly. "Even when things got really bad, I held on to it. It reminded me that I had been part of something special once." Stephen studied the photo, seeing not just their younger selves but also the continuity that connected that moment to this one. "We're still part of something special," he said. "It just looks different than we expected." "Better than we expected," Marcus corrected. "We thought success meant making it out. Turns out it means making it possible for others to make it out too." As they walked off the court together, Stephen realized that this was the shot he had been preparing for his entire life. Not the game winners, not the championship moments, but this, the chance to use his platform, his resources, and his influence to create lasting change in the community that had shaped him. The boy who had once dreamed of NBA stardom had achieved that goal. But the man who had learned to see beyond individual achievement had discovered something even more valuable: the power to transform dreams into reality, not just for himself, but for an entire community. In the end, that was the real response that changed everything. Not charity, not guilt, but the recognition that true success was measured not by what you achieved, but by what you made possible for others to achieve. It was a lesson that could only be learned in the place where dreams began, taught by the friend who had never stopped believing in the power of those dreams to change the world. The Roosevelt Community Center stood as proof that sometimes the best way to honor where you come from is to make sure others have the chance to go even further. And sometimes, finding your way back home is the first step toward helping others find their way forward.